It's been 6 years, one pandemic, 2 strikes, and tons of speculation since Marvel Studios announced they were making a Fantastic Four movie. And this week, it finally comes out. So let's talk about it. While I'm talking, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know what's your excitement level for the film. If you've seen it, what did you think about it? And give me the point of reference. Are you someone coming into this movie just extraordinarily excited and hyped? Are you coming in cynical? All that fun stuff. And let's get started with the good. And simply put, this movie feels like the MCU really is finding their footing again. It's a breath of fresh air. After several years of the MCU just kind of feeling stale. Not that every project was bad, but they have openly admitted that they were spread too thin, trying to crank out too many TV shows while putting out just as many movies, and because of that, the quality dropped. They acknowledged a couple years back that there were a lot of problems and started trying to make changes and just making sure the scripts were right before they started filming. This year in particular, it feels like you can see the transition happen. And the stark contrast between how choppy Captain America Brave New World was and how much it lacked any distinct style, and how cohesive this movie feels and how it does have its own unique vibe is just tremendous. And of course, likewise, I was also a huge fan of Thunderbolts, another movie that started filming after they made all of these changes. And it really feels like they've turned a corner, they've found their footing, and Fantastic Four is just a perfect example of it. And what I mean by that with this specific project is that it feels like something completely new in the world of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but not because they completely changed the genre. There have been several Disney Plus projects over the last 5 years that are something brand new in the MCU, but it's brand new by being a completely different genre from what they established in the first 3 phases. This is consistent with the genre, the humor, the action of the MCU. It has all the things that you want from an MCU film. It's playing to the built-in audience of this franchise, but it's a movie that has its own distinct aesthetic. Specifically that, they marketed it and they talked about it as how it's set on an alternate Earth's 1960 and has this retro future vibe. And that's exactly what the movie is. That it feels like we're going back in time, but into a sci-fi back in time, where there's all this wild tech that's analog, but can do all these amazing things. It has a distinct color palette. All of the architecture, structures, clothing have a distinct look to them. And it's some of the best world building of the entire MCU, where everywhere you go, it feels like this lived-in universe where everything functions just a little bit different from how we do things. You recognize something, but it's used differently. Or there's something we do daily, but it's done in a totally different way. And it just makes you want to explore this world more because it's so interesting and unique. It's not alien and different from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the sense of being a genre shift, but all of the way that it plays out has its own way of doing things. Even beyond just the aesthetic and the set design and the retrofuturism, even the way the story is told, it uses certain storytelling techniques and news broadcasts and other things that wouldn't fit in most other Marvel movies, but because they're kind of carving their own little space here, it's able to have this own kind of cinematic style and vocabulary and way that it does its storytelling that's so different from what we normally get, but different in a complementary way, not in some distant sort of way. And that is exactly what I think this movie does so well. It's more of what we love while feeling entirely fresh and new. To give like a specific example of this that's not really spoilers because it's both in the trailer and just the very beginning of the movie, but the film takes place 4 years after they gain their powers, And as a storytelling technique, it uses the news and these talk shows celebrating their history as a mechanism to just bring the audience into this world. Just organically catches us up on their origin story, their place in society, their powers, the way they're perceived. It does it just effortlessly in the context of the story, but as a very useful mechanism for the audience to just get acclimated to this world, get used to it, and be ready to just be off on an adventure deep into their time as the Fantastic Four. And that's just kind of what this movie just does really well. It's well thought out and has a whole world that you just want to explore, and it knows how to bring the audience into it. Another thing that kind of surprised me a little bit is just kind of how sci-fi it goes. And of course it was always going to have a sci-fi bent to it because you can, see flying cars in the trailer. And when you have a Jetsons-esque world, of course it comes off very sci-fi, but not wanting to go too much into this, there is space sequences in the movie. And like, there's a bit in it that manages to be very Fantastic Four, but also reminiscent of Interstellar and Star Trek 4 kind of all at the same time, which was really fun the way they were able to do that. And once again, just kind of doing new things with the Marvel Cinematic Universe with new influences and leaning into it, not being embarrassed of it. And a big reason they can do this is because this story is set on its own separate Earth. It's not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we know. It's multiverse, and so it's on a different alternate timeline version of Earth. And so they're able to just create this distinct vibe for everything, and you buy into it. It works, and you can play with the genre a little bit and do all this other stuff while, once again, staying true to what the MCU has built their audience delivering. Another thing I thought it did really well is the way that it was able to balance its tone, where the film has massive stakes. Galactus, our villain here, is a planet eater, so right there, the size of the stakes. And it puts that weight on the shoulders of the Fantastic Four, but it's also telling a story about a family. And so it's not just about this massive save the world, it's about save the family. And it makes it very personal while also global. And this thread is established very early on, and you just feel that. But it still manages to be, like, have this light, optimistic tone to it. Like, it's very hopeful, inspirational, while never forgetting the world is at stake. Our family is at stake. And while it has plenty of humor, it feels like it's more kind of organic banter between a family and friends as opposed to usual quippy Marvel humor. It's a little bit less corny. It's a little bit less silly. It's less of, breaking the tension with a quip and more about people just in these crazy situations and how they would really interact with one another. Just like I said, it's maybe less funny than a lot of other films while being more lighthearted. And that balance I thought was really nice of the way that it was able to do that and didn't feel like it just needed to throw a cheap joke constantly at the audience. And because it's the way that it's all about family and it's big, but it's personal, it's just a movie that just has a lot of heart. You really care about these characters, their dynamics with one another, because it brings it back down to all about the family. And of course, to that point, you have to stop and talk about the cast because they are the Fantastic Four, and we spent years speculating as to who would be cast, and ever since they've been cast, there have been all sorts of speculation. Were they miscast? Will they work? In the context of the movie that they are in, they fit perfectly. And they have great chemistry with one another, and you buy into these versions of the character. I was pretty nervous about Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, because we've seen him as really these flamboyant, charismatic characters. We've seen him as the stoic, reluctant father, anti-hero. And Reed Richards is not either one of those. He's so different from both of those. And can he play smart? And I think the answer to the question is yes. You buy into him as this person that feels like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders as he's constantly has this burden of trying to figure out how to solve problems, how to overcome the obstacles in front of him, how to think through everything that could go wrong, and you buy into that. There was a lot of controversy over some of the comments about Johnny Storm and how he's not really a womanizer. Like he's not doing the Chris Evans version that is just kind of this full-blown cocky hitting on the nurse. It's not like that full-blown caricature version of it. So in that regard, it is a dialed back Johnny. The movie also makes it clear that he likes women, even in some of the interactions with the way that it plays out with Silver Surfer. They play into that dynamic a little bit. He fit the movie that he was in. Vanessa Kirby, I thought, was kind of a real standout here. She's kind of brings a lot of the emotional weight to it as this mother in the middle of this horrible situation. So she has to like bring a lot to that. And I thought she did a really great job with that. And then with The Thing, the actor's name, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He spends almost all the time in the suit, so it's a little bit difficult to know, what's the performance, what's the artist and everything. But it's a really good version of The Thing, in particular because the dynamic with him and Johnny, they really feel like two guys that have a long history of banter or rapport. They're just so much fun to see on screen together. But it is that group chemistry that makes the movie work on so many different levels that you really feel the way that they irritate each other, the way they can be dismissive of Johnny, but that doesn't mean they don't respect him, and the way that they, like, you can see the faults in the group. That's what, like, going back to the world building and the character dynamics, everything feels like it has a history that you understand very quickly, how it works. It doesn't need to over-explain it, but you get it because they just calibrated things just right. And just as a final thing to say about this one, after two phases with so many projects that felt fixed in the editing room, reworked, reshot, duct taped together with reshoots and editing tricks. And we even saw that with Daredevil and Captain America 4 earlier this year. This film feels completely cohesive. That they took their time, long time, until they had a clear vision for what they wanted to do, and they were able to bring that to the big screen. If there were any significant reshoots, it is not in any way obvious when you watch the film. That it feels like they knew exactly the film that they wanted to make, and that's what they set out to make. And it probably helps a lot when you're in your own little pocket universe. You don't have to try and wiggle around trying to fit into the other films. For whether it's that, whatever, they got it right. And it feels like a properly written and directed movie. Even to the level of, like, as I was watching it, I was reminded that John Watts, the guy that directed the last trilogy of Spider-Man movies, was supposed to direct this film. And I was watching the film like, oh man, I am so glad he didn't direct this film. Not because I didn't like his movies, but because what Shackman brought to this film feels special in a way that I don't feel Watts' Spider-Man movies were special. Special in their own way, but this was special in this whole other way that it just felt like we're being brought off to a different new world, telling a cohesive story where they knew what they were trying to say, what they were trying to do, and they were able to pull it off. For me, this was a massive, massive win. Few more things to talk about here. Let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. And the first thing to talk about here is the story. If you've seen the trailers, if you know anything about the direction that the film is going, you can piece together that it is returning to story territory that previous movies have covered. And you have a little bit of the origin story in there, done through kind of montage at the beginning, and then we are doing Silver Surfer comes as the herald for Galactus who wants to eat the Earth. Both of these things were the plot of the films from 20 years ago. Now, they were 20 years ago, but this is story territory that we have been here before. We have told these stories before. But we're in the mixed section. While they are stories that have been told before, they are told dramatically better here. Other things to talk about here aren't good or bad things, but they are the questions that people ask with these movies. Does the Fantastic Four First Steps have a mid or post-credit scene? Yes and yes. There is a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. The mid-credit scene is the more important of the two. That is a tease for future things to come. It is one you absolutely want to stick around for. It has been acknowledged that this was not directed by Shackman, that the Russos did direct this scene. So that can tell you just how much of a tease this is and what it is a tease for. So the mid one, absolutely stick around for it. It is just a tease, but it is a tease that you want to see. And then the post-credit scene is just a cute little fun thing that is paying off something referenced earlier in the film. It's not teasing anything. It's not of grand importance. It is a fun little bit, but it's like 30 seconds. That's like, oh, that was fun. I kind of enjoyed that a little bit. But if you're desperately needing to go pee, if you got to leave, you don't really need to stick around for the post-credit scene. You do need to stick around for the mid-credit scene. Other question people always ask with these movies, what do you need to watch before the Fantastic Four First Steps? Nothing. It is a standalone story, which in and of itself was very refreshing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's set on a different Earth from the main continuity of the MCU, and so for that reason, it's its own little pocket story. There isn't a single thing in this movie that requires any prior knowledge or anything you need to watch before. No homework required, just a solid Marvel Cinematic Universe film with great world building that I highly recommend that you check out. But there are just a few more things to talk about. Let's move on to the bad. And to be perfectly clear, I'm very positive on the film. These didn't dramatically in any way change my opinion on the film in a negative direction. But I try to be thorough and list off anything that it might be something that could really hurt your experience watching the film. First one that comes to mind, as much as the movie overall looks really cool, there are some spotty CGI elements in here. In particular, there's a CGI baby that at first glance isn't too bad, but there's plenty of lingering shots, and the longer it lingers, the more you're like, that's a little bit unsettling. That's a little weird. But even like a Galactus's face, it did not have the same realism of, say, a Thanos. But like I said, overall, the movie looks really cool. But there are a few things where you're like, considering how great all this other stuff looks, you couldn't get a baby, right? Other one that bugged me a little bit about the film is that there's a lot of plot armor thrown around in the film. Not even necessarily, I mean, sometimes it's for the characters, but a lot of it's just for plot elements. In order for certain things to work, it requires that Galactus not do really obvious things. The way that they're trying to come up with plans and schemes to defeat Galactus gets pretty sci-fi mumbo-jumbo and strains believability. Of course, we're in a movie with flying cars and Galactus, but like there has to be some amount of believability in what you're doing. And the leap between what Reed does with an egg and what the plan is inside the movie is just, it's like such a huge leap in a very small time frame that makes you, okay, you're kind of cheating there a little bit. And the last one I wanted to talk about, I felt like the Fantastic Four were sort of isolated in the film. And it's interesting because they'll be on talk shows, they'll give press conferences, the Thing will walk out on the street. But the way the movie's structured, you really have the Fantastic Four off in the Baxter Building or off on this mission away from everyone else. They just feel like they're just them being them together for a huge chunk of the movie. That even kind of shapes the way that like Johnny Storm becomes characterized, to where he's, typically a little bit more of, the flashy guy that loves being in the spotlight. He's the daredevil. He's the womanizer. And when you make a story where he's isolated away from the public and women besides his sister, you remove characteristics of Johnny Storm. The movie tells us that he has the characteristics that are true to the character, but you've put him in a scenario where we don't get to see him actually treat women that way or be the big bombastic, flamboyant guy that loves to impress people with his abilities. And so it's kind of weird the way that they're like so isolated in the film. It doesn't have maybe as much action as I would have liked. That like it montages a little bit of the Fantastic Four doing more normal size heroics. And I feel the movie would have been served a little bit better if let's take one or two of those and let's leave them in the movie as a full sequence. And let's see them use their powers at a normal size threat. Because so much of what you get is the cosmic, it's Galactus. It's such a big threat that you don't feel like you even fully get to see their powers as much as you'd like. Or that's an itch in the movie that wasn't fully scratched. I wish I would have gotten a little bit more of that in the film. Even as I'm saying these negatives, in the scheme of things, they're very small pieces of the puzzle. Real quick before I give you my final thoughts, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what are you thinking when it comes to Fantastic Four First Steps? Also, be sure to come back over this next week. I'm going to have a spoiler review, rank all of the Fantastic Four movies, and play catch up on all of my big MCU rankings. The movies and the TV shows, the heroes, the villains, I think the final battles, all the big epic stuff that I haven't done in 2 or 3 years. Finally doing it again. It's going to be a busy week. I went into this movie very optimistic and hopeful, and I'd say this movie exceeded my expectations, that it really did pull me into this world, made me love these characters, made me want to explore this world more, and reminded me of what made the MCU so exciting during the last decade. With this and Thunderbolts, it really feels like Kevin Feige is finally getting control of the MCU again. And so I'm optimistic for the future of the MCU. Overall, it's an A on the entertainment scale, a 9 out of 10. And this is must see for comic book movie fans. Between this and Superman, we're getting 2 very comic book movies that just drop you into these worlds that you want to explore, that have their own distinct vibes. It's a good month to be a comic book movie fan. Be sure to come back this weekend for all those rankings, and thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.